The sound of breaking glass shouldn't be beautiful, but that night, as the crystal stem snapped between my husband's trembling fingers, I thought it was the most honest sound I'd heard in months. The wine splashed across the white tablecloth like spilled blood. Deep, rich, impossible to ignore. And in the reflection of that red stain, I saw everything I had refused to see for far too long. My perfect Christmas dinner, the one I had spent weeks planning, was unraveling faster than a ribbon pulled too tight. The scent of cinnamon and rosemary mingled with the sharp sting of humiliation. Candles flickered in confusion. Guests murmured. And at the head of the table, my husband, Ethan Rivers, the man who once swore to love me through every season, was staring at me like I had set the whole house on fire. Maybe I had. I sat there, perfectly still, a smile frozen on my face as his ex, Lydia Moore, rose from her seat in outrage. Her lipstick was perfect, crimson, expensive, confident. She looked exactly the way I used to look before I learned what betrayal does to a woman's spine. "How could you do this?" she screamed at him, her voice trembling between rage and disbelief. "Were you going to tell me, Ethan? Or were you hoping I'd just figure it out?" The guests froze, forks midair, eyes wide, caught between pity and fascination. I could feel their gazes like knives across my skin, but I didn't flinch. I had worked too hard for this moment, too precisely, too quietly. Ethan slammed his palm against the table. "Naomi, what did you do?" He looked at me like I was the problem, like I had somehow conjured the chaos that was now devouring him. I tilted my head slightly, the kind of calm that drives guilty men insane. "Me?" I said softly. I just pressed play. The words hung in the air, sharp, deliberate, deadly. And somewhere behind me, the small black speaker on the sideboard clicked to life. Ethan's own voice filled the room, loud, clear. "Don't worry, babe, she'll never know. She still thinks I'm working late." Gasps rippled through the room. Lydia's hand flew to her mouth. Someone dropped a fork. Ethan turned pale. The kind of pale that comes from knowing the truth has finally found a microphone. I could feel my pulse steadying as he stumbled to his feet. "Naomi, stop this. Please, turn it off." But I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just watched. Watched as the perfect image of our marriage, the dinner parties, the holidays, the practiced smiles, crumbled like sugar glass under heat. And yet, through all the noise, I felt an odd kind of peace. Because this wasn't chaos to me. This was justice. As Lydia lunged toward Ethan, shouting things I couldn't bother to hear, I reached for my wine glass, lifted it slowly, and whispered just loud enough for him to catch the words, "Merry Christmas, darling." And then, as the room descended into shouting and shame, I smiled. Because they had no idea. This night wasn't an accident. It wasn't some burst of madness or jealousy. It was a performance. And I had written every line. The truth is, the moment Ethan invited his ex to Christmas dinner, my revenge began. 6 weeks earlier, my house smelled like nutmeg and optimism. Christmas had always been my favorite season. The kind of season that makes you forget that people can lie. That betrayal can hide behind warm lights and matching pajamas. Back then, I still believed in us. Ethan and I had been married for 12 years. We'd built what looked, from the outside, like a good life. A big house, 2 cars, a glossy Christmas card every year with forced smiles and a golden retriever in the middle. He worked in real estate. I ran an interior design studio. We were the couple everyone else thought had it figured out. But lately, the air between us had changed. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet. Too quiet. He started coming home late, always with a reason. Deals to close, clients to meet, traffic delays. His phone was always face down now, his laugh, muted, softer, never shared with me anymore. And yet, I kept decorating the house. Maybe because I thought if I filled the silence with lights and garlands, I wouldn't have to hear the truth creeping in. I remember one night, I was stringing lights on the staircase when I heard his phone buzz. He was in the shower. It was instinct, not intention, that made me look. The message was short, too casual for something so dangerous. "Can't wait to see you again, love. Maybe Christmas?" I stared at the words until the world went soundless. The string of lights in my hands blinked off like even they couldn't bear to watch. When Ethan came out of the shower, he smiled that same practiced smile and kissed my forehead. I said nothing. Not then, not yet. I spent the next few days pretending everything was fine, pretending I didn't know that my husband had already penciled someone else into our Christmas plans, and pretending that when he said, "I'm working late," he wasn't really working on his lies. But the pretending started to crack. It was a Thursday night when it happened. I woke up to find him sitting at the edge of the bed, typing furiously on his phone, his face lit by the blue glow of deceit. I didn't move. I just watched. And that's when I realized he was smiling. Not the smile he gave me anymore. Not the half-tired, polite smile reserved for routine affection. It was a real one, the kind he used to give me when he was in love. And I knew. I didn't need to see her name, didn't need to read another word. That smile was confession enough. The next morning, I made coffee. I poured his cup first, the way I always did, then mine. We sat across from each other, married silence filling the space. He reached for his phone mid-sip, grinned, and said, "I might have to travel next week. There's a client in Chicago." I looked up from my mug and said, "Chicago? In December? That's cold." He nodded. "It's business." I smiled. A real one. Because now, I was the one keeping secrets. That night, when he fell asleep, I opened my laptop and searched one thing: private investigators near me. Because if he thought he was good at hiding the truth, he hadn't met me yet. People always assume the hardest part of betrayal is the discovery. It isn't. It's the confirmation. The moment when suspicion stops being a shadow and becomes a living, breathing thing with a face and a name. I got my confirmation 3 days after hiring Grace Daniels. Grace wasn't what I expected. She wasn't the trench coat, cigarette-smoking detective out of a noir film. She was a retired police officer in her late 50s, with soft curls, round glasses, and a voice that felt like warm coffee. But behind that gentle exterior was steel, the kind that had seen people lie 1,000 different ways and still called their bluff. When she handed me the manila folder in a quiet cafe downtown, I didn't open it right away. Part of me wanted to push it across the table and walk away. A bigger part, the part Ethan never bothered to see, was done being blind. Grace spoke softly. "You're strong, Naomi. Stronger than you think. Open it when you're ready." I was ready the moment she stood up to leave. The first picture was of Ethan at a wine bar. Not our wine bar, one we had never gone to together. He was leaning close to a woman, shoulders angled toward her, eyes full of easy charm. The next photo made my throat tighten. She was beautiful. Not stunning in a loud way, but in a deliberate way. Like she curated her looks the same way she curated her life. Tall, slender, hair like polished mahogany, a red dress that fit so perfectly it could only belong to a woman who wanted to be noticed. Her name, according to Grace's report, was Lydia Moore, a PR consultant, Ethan's ex-girlfriend from years before, the one he dated right before he met me, the one he always said wasn't serious. But the way he leaned toward her in the photos, that was serious. I stared at the picture for a long time. The red dress burned into my memory. A warning, a symbol, a declaration. There were photos of them having coffee, lunch, a late-night walk outside a hotel. Their hands brushed once, just once. But the electricity in that single moment said everything. The last photo was the one that made something inside me finally snap open. They were standing by Ethan's car, her hand on his chest, his face close to hers, like the world had shrunk to just the two of them. Grace had written one note at the bottom. "They meet often, always after work. He isn't careful. He doesn't think he needs to be." I closed the folder slowly, deliberately, like sealing a coffin. That night, Ethan came home smelling faintly of the same cologne he wore when we first started dating. He hadn't worn it in years. "You're up late," he said, loosening his tie. "I had some things to finish," I answered. My voice was steady. He kissed the top of my head and said, "You know I appreciate you, right?" I looked at him, really looked, at the man who had whispered promises into my neck, who had held me through storms, who had once said, "You're the only woman I'll ever need." And for the first time, I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt clarity, cold, sharp, clean. "I know," I said softly. But what I meant was, I know everything now. Later, as he slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling, the image of Lydia's red dress burning through the dark, and I made my decision. If my husband wanted to invite ghosts back into our lives, then I would give them a Christmas they'd never forget. People think revenge begins with rage. It doesn't. Not the kind that works. Real revenge begins with patience, the cold, methodical kind that watches quietly while the guilty continue digging their own graves. For the next week, that's exactly what I did. I watched. I waited. And Ethan, blissfully confident in his own deceit, made my job far too easy. He started staying out later, phone always face down, showers the moment he walked through the door as if he could rinse guilt off his skin. He'd hum sometimes, a soft, light tune he used to hum when he was excited about us. Now he hummed it after being with her. One night, after he drifted into a deep sleep, I reached gently beneath his side of the bed and pulled out the shoebox he thought I didn't know about. Inside were receipts, lavish ones, wine bars, restaurants I'd only seen in magazines, a boutique hotel by the lake. But it was the final receipt that told the real truth, a jewelry store charge of $1,750, dated 3 days earlier. A handwritten note on the receipt read, "Ready for pickup." My heart didn't break. It calcified, solid, immovable. I placed everything back exactly as I found it. Then I emailed Grace. I need more. No rush. I have time. The next afternoon, the more arrived. Grace slid another envelope across our cafe table, her eyes searching mine. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm focused," I said. It was the truth, the kind of truth that terrifies the people who hurt you. Inside the envelope were timestamps, audio transcripts, and hotel entry logs. Every detail documented, every lie exposed. Grace had written in her crisp handwriting, "He meets her nearly every Wednesday and Friday. They spend 2 to 3 hours together. She drives herself. He pays for everything." I stared at the transcripts, read every word, not to hurt myself, but to prepare, to understand the scale of the lie so I could match it with justice. One line stood out. "Ethan, she still believes I'm just stressed. She'd never think I'd go back to you." Lydia replied with a soft laugh. "Lydia, tell your wife whatever you want. I'm not afraid of her." I felt something shift in me, a quiet seismic tilt, not anger, something older, steadier, like a woman rediscovering her backbone after someone tried to snap it clean in two. That night, as Ethan slept with his back to me, I whispered into the darkness, not loud enough for him to hear, at least not with his ears. "You should be afraid of me." And then came the moment I didn't expect. A message on my phone, not from Grace, not from a friend, from my husband's assistant. "Hi, Mrs. Rivers. Just confirming the delivery of the 2015 Bordeaux Mr. Rivers requested for your holiday dinner. He said it's the vintage Lydia likes best." I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. My breath went still. The world narrowed. Holiday dinner. Bordeaux, she preferred. Ethan's name attached to it. He wasn't just cheating. He was planning to bring her into our Christmas, into my home. The place I built with my hands, my money, my heart, my stupid, loyal hope. I closed my eyes, exhaled once. And that's when the idea came. Sharp, elegant, absolute. This wasn't just going to be revenge. It was going to be a masterpiece. A slow, unraveling symphony of truth performed over the prettiest table I had ever set. But for a performance like that, I needed one more thing. Proof. Not for myself, but for everyone who'd be sitting at my Christmas table when the truth finally walked into the room. Ethan gave me my opening on a quiet Sunday morning, the kind of morning that pretends to be peaceful just before it detonates your entire life. I was arranging freshly washed linens in the guest room when he appeared in the doorway, hands in his pockets, eyes too bright for a man who claimed to be exhausted from work. "Hey," he said with a hesitant smile, "I've been meaning to talk to you about Christmas dinner." I folded a pillowcase slowly, neatly, buying myself the time to keep my expression neutral. "Christmas dinner?" I repeated softly. "As in, our Christmas dinner?" "Yes." He stepped further into the room. "You know how much the holiday means to me, to us." It took everything in me not to laugh. Instead, I waited, let him hang himself with his own politeness. So, Lydia will be joining us. There it was, the line. The match dropped into the gasoline he didn't realize he'd spilled. I froze, but only for half a heartbeat. His eyes flickered, searching my face for a reaction. I gave him none, just a slow, practiced blink. Oh? He rushed to fill the silence. She's alone this year. No family in town. It would mean a lot if we could, be mature about things. Be mature. The same phrase men use when they want you to shut up and swallow the disrespect. Inside, I felt something sharp and clean settle into place. Resolve, control, purpose. But on the outside, I offered him a warm, gracious smile. Of course, Ethan. I stepped toward him, placed a hand lightly on his arm. It's Christmas. I would never turn someone away. Relief washed across his face, pathetic and self-satisfied, almost grateful. I knew you'd understand, he said, pulling me into a one-sided hug. You always do. And for the first time, I agreed with him. I did understand, just not in the way he thought. As he left the room, humming, I allowed myself a small, private smile. The kind of smile a woman wears when the final piece of her plan slides perfectly into place. I returned to the kitchen, opened my laptop, and typed a new email, one with a tone so politely neutral it almost sang. Subject, Christmas dinner. Hi Lydia, Ethan mentioned you would be joining us this year. I just wanted to personally welcome you. After all, Christmas is such a special time. It's always nice to have old friends around, looking forward to seeing what you and Ethan have been working on. Naomi. I read it twice, smoothed the edges of my smile, and pressed send. The message delivered. No anger, no accusation, just elegance. The kind that leaves sweat at the back of your enemy's neck because it never arrives the way they expect. I stood from my chair, straightened the centerpiece on the dining table, and whispered to myself, "Let the games begin." Behind me, the clock ticked softly, measuring the short distance between now and Christmas, and every truth that would finally come with it. The days leading up to Christmas felt strangely peaceful, like standing in the eye of a hurricane, knowing the real wind is still coming. On the surface, everything was normal. Ethan left early for meetings, came home late from work dinners, smelled faintly of perfume that wasn't mine, and each time he kissed my cheek, I smiled as if I didn't know where his lips had been. He had no idea he was walking through a house being quietly transformed into a stage for his own downfall. I spent those days preparing, not just the house, myself. I ironed the linens with a kind of meditative focus, each smooth stroke whispering, "He thinks I'm blind." I polished the silverware until my reflection stared back, steady and unblinking. He has no idea what's coming. I decorated the tree with precise intention. Ornaments evenly spaced, lights warm and honey gold, a perfect backdrop for the imperfect truths about to be exposed. Let him walk straight into the lie he built. And then came the not anger, the literal fireplace, crackling softly every night as I sat nearby testing the audio recorder I'd placed discreetly behind the garland, hidden in plain sight, just like the truth. I tested my phone's camera angles next. A simple placement, propped between two holiday cards on the mantel. Festive, innocent, undeniable. Grace met me twice that week. We went through the evidence, the photos, the transcripts, the timeline. She looked at me with a mixture of respect and caution. Revenge is a sharp tool, she said. It can cut both ways. I nodded. I'm not here to destroy him, Grace. I watched the snow fall outside, calm and pale against the night. I'm here to free myself. On Christmas Eve, the house glowed with warmth, a romantic lie wrapped in ribbons and soft music. Ethan loved it. He walked in that evening, saw the twinkling lights, and kissed me with renewed affection, as if decorating the house was proof of my devotion. You really outdid yourself this year, he said, running his hand down my back. I wanted everything to be perfect, I replied, and I meant it, just not in the way he assumed. He didn't notice the jewelry box I found in his coat pocket earlier, the one holding a diamond necklace far too youthful and far too delicate to be meant for a woman who had aged alongside him. No, this necklace wasn't for a wife. It was for a muse, the one in the red dress stamped across Grace's photos like a warning label. I put the box back exactly where I found it, not out of mercy, but out of strategy. A weapon untouched is a weapon undetected. That night, as snow dusted the windows and the quiet hum of holiday music filled the house, I stood in front of the mirror adjusting the deep emerald dress I'd chosen. It wasn't the color of jealousy, it was the color of empire, a queen's color. My hair fell in soft waves, my makeup subtle but flawless. I looked like a woman loved, not a woman betrayed. Perfect. Let them underestimate me. That's when I'm strongest. I turned off the bedroom lights, feeling the stillness of the house settle like silk around me. Tomorrow, everything changed. Tomorrow, the truth would finally breathe in a room full of witnesses. I slid beneath the sheets beside Ethan, listening to his even, oblivious breaths. And just before sleep carried me, I whispered into the darkness, "Let this be the last night I ever pretend." Christmas Day arrived wrapped in quiet tension, the kind you can feel under your skin, like electricity humming through the walls. The house looked perfect. The table was a masterpiece, fine china, polished silver, crystal glasses catching firelight, a scene painted in elegance for a truth that would soon rip through it like a blade. I'd never created anything so beautiful just to watch it burn. By late afternoon, guests began arriving. Family, neighbors, colleagues, people who believed in the illusion Ethan and I had maintained for years. People who would soon learn that illusions crack like glassware under pressure. Ethan floated through the room, pouring drinks, lighting candles, looking like the picture of a devoted husband. His hand brushed my waist once, a casual, possessive touch that made my stomach tighten in disgust. But I smiled. I always smiled. Tonight, that was my sharpest weapon. At 6:12 p.m., I heard the knock. 3 polite taps, a pause, another tap. She always had a flair for entrances. I opened the door to find Lydia Moore standing there in a dress the exact shade of her arrogance. Deep wine red, sleeveless, fabric clinging to her like a second skin. Her hair curled around her shoulders in perfect waves. Her perfume floated in like a challenge, and around her neck, glittering beneath the porch lights, was the diamond necklace Ethan bought her. Not for me, for her. "Naomi," she breathed, smiling too wide. "Merry Christmas." The audacity. I stepped aside. "Merry Christmas, Lydia. Please, come in." She entered like she owned oxygen itself, her gaze skimming over the decorations as if comparing them to her last hotel suite. Ethan appeared almost instantly, far too quickly, like a child unable to hide excitement when a forbidden toy is brought into the room. "Lydia, you made it," he said, voice warm, too warm. He pulled her into a hug that lasted precisely 3 seconds too long. I watched everything, every glance, every shift in posture, every spark of familiarity they tried so desperately to hide. Guests did too, noticing, thinking, wondering. At dinner, I made sure Lydia sat directly across from me while Ethan sat between us. A perfect triangle of betrayal, draped in candlelight and holiday cheer. "So Lydia," I said lightly, cutting into the turkey, "that Ethan tells me you've been helping him with some business matters lately." Her fork paused. Just a fraction of a second, but enough for a trained eye. "Oh, yes," she said smoothly. "Just a little consulting." I nodded. "How thoughtful of you both to keep it quiet. I had no idea you were so involved." The room tensed, subtly but unmistakably. People leaned in, eyes sharpened, chewing slowed. Ethan cleared his throat. "Naomi, come on. It's Christmas. Let's not make things awkward." I tilted my head. "Awkward? Why would it be awkward?" Lydia reached for her wine glass, her hand just slightly unsteady. I smiled at her, sweetly. We ate in uneasy silence for a few minutes until Ethan attempted to lighten the mood. "Let's do a toast," he said, lifting his glass. "To, well, new beginnings." I held my glass, but didn't drink. Instead, I whispered, almost too softly to hear, "Perfect." I reached beneath the tablecloth and pressed the tiny remote hidden in my lap. A soft click, barely audible, but the effect was immediate. From the sideboard speaker, Ethan's voice filled the room. Crystal clear, undeniable. "Don't worry, babe, she still thinks I'm working late. She'll never catch on." Forks clattered against plates. Someone gasped. Lydia went rigid. Ethan's face bleached white. White like snow, white like surrender. The recording continued. "It's only a matter of time, Lydia. Naomi won't make a scene. She's too predictable." Silence, thick as ice. Everyone stared at him, at her, at me, at the truth bleeding out across the tablecloth like spilled wine. Ethan shoved back his chair. "Naomi, turn it off. What the hell are you doing?" I lifted my glass slowly, calmly, elegantly. "Me?" I said. "I'm just being predictable." And I drank. Lydia shot to her feet, rage twisting her face into something sharp and ugly. "You told me you'd leave her, she screamed. "You promised." Guests recoiled. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Ethan lunged for the speaker, but the damage was done. The truth was already staining every corner of the room. I stood, smoothed my dress, and said quietly, "Dinner is served." Then I walked away. Behind me, the holiday music resumed. Peaceful, gentle, oblivious to the storm I had just unleashed. They had no idea this was only the beginning. The moment I stepped out of the dining room, the noise behind me exploded. Shouts, accusations, chairs scraping violently against hardwood. But I didn't turn back. Not yet. I wanted them to marinate in the truth, to feel it claw down their throats the same way their lies had clawed down mine. I walked into the hallway, paused beside the framed wedding photo Ethan insisted we hang every year, and listened. Lydia's voice cut through the air like broken glass. "You told me you were done with her, Ethan. You said this marriage was over." Ethan hissed back, panicked, trembling, the sound of a man whose walls were collapsing. "Lydia, stop! Just stop! This is not the right time." "So there was a right time?" she snapped. "Was it before or after you slept with me last week?" Gasps from the dining room. Someone muttered a prayer. I smiled at the photo beside me. We looked so happy on that day. He held my waist. I leaned into him. Two actors rehearsing their lines for a play neither of us knew was doomed. I re-entered the room slowly. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just calm. The kind of calm a woman has when she's already buried her old life and walked away from the grave. When I appeared in the doorway, all eyes snapped to me. Fear, shock, shame, pity, a buffet of reactions I had carefully prepared. Ethan stumbled toward me, his voice cracking. "Naomi, please, we can talk about this privately." "Privately?" I echoed. "Why start now?" He froze, completely. I moved around the table, past Lydia, who flinched when our eyes met, and stood at the head of the table again, the same place I had been when this night began. I reached for the remote and clicked it again. Another recording, sharper this time. "You don't have to worry, babe. Naomi won't leave. She's too comfortable, too soft. She needs me." Lydia's face turned crimson. Ethan's knees buckled, his hand gripping the back of a chair. I let the words echo, let them stain the room, let them mark him. Then I spoke, not loudly, but with the steadiness of a woman reclaiming her voice. "You thought I was soft," I said. "You mistook my loyalty for weakness, my kindness for blindness." I looked at Lydia. She mistook it too. Then at Ethan, especially at Ethan. "You both forgot something important." A pause, long enough for him to swallow the dread. "I might bend," I said, "but I don't break." Lydia slammed her napkin onto the table. "This is ridiculous. I'm not sitting here and being humiliated." I raised a hand slightly. "Who's humiliating you?" "I'm simply letting the truth introduce itself." Someone whispered, "Lord have mercy." Another muttered, "She set them both up." Ethan dragged a hand down his face. "Naomi, please, can we step outside? Just, please." I tilted my head. "Why? So you can spin another story?" He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, words failing him, finally. Lydia stood abruptly. "I'm leaving," she snapped. "This is insane." "Lydia," Ethan pleaded. "Wait, just wait." She turned on him. "You said you loved me." "And he said he loved me," I reminded her. "He lies often. You'll get used to it." She went silent, shaking, furious, exposed. I walked toward the door, opened it, and said with a courteous gesture, "Merry Christmas, Lydia. Drive safe." She stormed out, heels stabbing the floor like she wanted to kill it. When the door slammed shut, Ethan sagged into a chair, hands buried in his hair. "Why?" he whispered. Not to me, to the air, to the wreckage, to the truth finally crushing him. I leaned in, my voice soft as frost. Because you wanted to blend two lives that were never meant to touch, and you thought I'd quietly watch you do it. He lifted his eyes, red, wild, desperate. Naomi, I can fix this. I shook my head. No, Ethan. You can't fix something you shattered with your own hands. I turned away from him, from the table, from the chaos, because I was done fixing, done begging, done shrinking. Tonight wasn't revenge. It was revelation, the kind that frees a woman from the last chain she didn't realize she was still carrying. As I walked down the hallway, I whispered just loud enough for him to hear, "This was the only gift I wanted this Christmas." Behind me, the house stayed silent, the kind of silence that follows a truth too loud to ignore. The morning after the Christmas disaster felt unreal, as if the world had tilted sometime during the night and I'd woken up in a quieter, colder version of my life. But not a worse one, just a truer one. I didn't wake up in the house Ethan and I shared. I hadn't slept there. I hadn't even stayed long enough to watch him try to rebuild the pieces of his dignity scattered across the dining room floor. No, I left. Not in anger, not in tears, but with a calm so deep it felt like stepping out of a storm and realizing I had never been the one drowning. I spent the night at a small apartment I'd secretly leased weeks earlier, a place with blank walls, clean air, and space that belonged only to me. The mattress was thin, the fridge empty, but I slept like a woman who'd finally set down a weight she'd carried for far too long. When I woke up, my phone was lit up like a Christmas tree. Calls, messages, voicemails from numbers I didn't recognize. The recording had spread. Of course it had. Humiliation travels fast. So does truth. I made tea and sat on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city move quietly beneath me. For the first time in years, I breathed without someone else's lies filling my lungs. By 9 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Grace, turn on the news," she said. Her voice was a mix of concern and admiration. I flipped to a local channel. Ethan's real estate firm had already posted a statement, cold, corporate, surgical. They were reviewing allegations of ethical misconduct. He'd been placed on temporary leave. Translation, they were cutting him loose before he dragged the whole company down with him. I didn't feel satisfaction. Not yet. Just inevitability. Another call came. My sister, who lived 2 states away, her voice was soft. "Naomi, honey, I saw the video. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said, and I realized I meant it. Ethan called next. 5 times, then 10. I let every call ring out, not out of cruelty, but clarity. I had nothing left to say to a man who never truly listened to me in the first place. An hour later, he texted, "Naomi, please, I need to talk to you. I can explain." Explain what? His creativity? His stamina? The rehearsed lies he fed 2 women while pretending to be a good man? I powered off my phone. Silence again. Sweet, clean silence. By midday, Grace arrived at my apartment. She handed me a folder. Not manila this time, but crisp, white, official-looking. "He signed," she said. I blinked. "Signed what?" She lifted the folder slightly. "Divorce papers, settlements, asset transfers. He wants to make amends." I almost laughed. Of course he wanted to make amends now, after his reputation crumbled, after his business distanced itself, after Lydia publicly announced on social media that she'd been manipulated and deceived. He wasn't remorseful. He was cornered. I didn't open the folder, not yet. Grace sat beside me. "You look lighter," she observed. "I feel lighter," I whispered, then paused. "No, that's not right. I feel present." For years, as I lived in a marriage where I had to make myself small to fit the shape of his ego. Now, sitting in a tiny apartment, barely furnished, I felt larger than I'd ever felt in that house. Grace stood to leave. "Take your time, Naomi. Healing isn't a race." But as she reached the door, I asked, "What happens to them now, Ethan and Lydia?" She shrugged gently. "They made their choices. Now they live with them." When she left, I opened the folder. Page after page, numbers, signatures, dates, acknowledgments, the legal disassembling of a life. At the very bottom, a handwritten note from Ethan. "I'm sorry, I don't know why I did what I did. I want to fix this. Please tell me how." I stared at the words, feeling nothing. No anger, no longing, no heartbreak, just closure. Quiet, complete. I folded the note, set it aside, and whispered to the empty apartment, "You can't fix something you broke on purpose." Outside, the winter sun pushed through the clouds, weak but steady, and for the first time in a long time, I felt steady too. This was the aftermath. Not destruction, but transformation. Not an ending, but the start of a life where I no longer stood in anyone's shadow. A life where I finally stood in my own light. Rebirth doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't announce itself with music or fanfare or some grand cinematic moment where everything suddenly makes sense. Rebirth is quiet. It creeps in gently, like morning light slipping through a window you forgot to close the night before. For me, it began with an empty apartment and a pot of soup simmering on a cheap stove. It was 3 weeks after the Christmas eruption when I realized I had stopped checking my phone for Ethan's messages, stopped expecting an apology that would undo anything, stopped waiting for someone to tell me what I should feel next. I woke up one morning and didn't think about him first thing. I thought about me. I cooked myself breakfast. Eggs, toast, blackberries in a bowl. Simple, normal. The kind of breakfast you make when you're no longer walking on broken glass. I showered slowly, letting the hot water run over the parts of me that had carried the most pain. My shoulders, my chest, the back of my neck where tension used to live permanently. And as the steam filled the bathroom, I caught my reflection in the fogged mirror. I looked older, yes, but I also looked softer. Not weak, just no longer bracing for impact. Later that week, I began sketching again. Designs, textures, color palettes, things I used to love before my life got swallowed by a man who needed too much and gave too little. The more I drew, the more my hands remembered me. Then came the message that changed everything. A former client reached out saying she'd heard I was back in business and wanted me to redesign her boutique. I wasn't back in business, not officially, but the idea sent a spark through me. So I said yes. And that yes felt like the first brick in a new foundation. One I was building for myself instead of for a marriage that was already ashes. Within weeks, I had more inquiries. Recommendations spread. People whispered my name with admiration again, not pity. My tiny apartment turned into a makeshift studio. Fabric swatches everywhere, sketches taped to the wall, coffee cups marking late-night work sessions. It was chaotic. But it was my chaos, my creation, my life waking up. And slowly, I began to wake up too. One evening, as I watched the sunset bleed into the horizon from my balcony, I opened the last of Ethan's letters I hadn't bothered to read. His handwriting looked desperate, uneven, not the polished penmanship he used when he was still pretending to be noble. The letter said, "I feel like I'm losing everything. Please tell me what to do. I'll change. Just come home." Home. The word tasted bitter. Home wasn't a place. Not anymore. Home was peace. Home was breath. Home was the woman I had left behind so many times just to keep him comfortable. And now home was me. Without thinking, I tore the letter down the middle. Then again, and again. I let the pieces fall onto the balcony table like confetti for a celebration I didn't even know I was having. I had been waiting months, years maybe, for Ethan to choose me. But the truth was simple. I needed to choose myself. 2 months later, my design studio reopened under a new name, Rivers and Renew. Corny? Maybe, but it felt right, like stepping back into my own skin. Clients filled the space with laughter, ideas, possibilities. I had purpose again. But more importantly, I had identity. One that wasn't wife or caretaker or keeper of someone else's peace. I was Naomi Rivers, a woman who survived betrayal not with rage, but with resurrection. I was not broken. I was reborn. A year later, Christmas didn't sneak up on me. It walked toward me with open arms, soft, gentle, familiar. And for the first time in my adult life, I didn't brace myself for disappointment. I welcomed it. My new home sat on a quiet street near the coast, a place where the wind carried salt and the morning smelled like possibility. The rooms were small, sun-washed, and intentionally imperfect. I filled them with things that made me feel alive. Hand-woven baskets, clippings of wild greenery, paintings from local artists, and light. So much light. It was the opposite of the house I once shared with Ethan, where everything was curated to look flawless while everything inside was falling apart. This house? It didn't hide anything. It didn't need to. I spent Christmas Eve baking ginger cookies and arranging fresh eucalyptus on the table, ma'am. Friends drifted in and out, the new friends I'd made through my studio. People who knew me not as Ethan's wife, but as Naomi, the woman who could redesign an entire room with 3 pillows and a vision. There was laughter, messy wrapping paper, wine poured into mismatched glasses because I no longer believed perfection was something that lived in symmetry. It lived in authenticity, in effort, in the warm chaos of people who show up because they want to, not because it's expected. As night settled in, I sat on my balcony with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, watching the quiet glow of the town below. Snow didn't fall here, just a soft ocean mist that clung to the air like a whisper. I thought of the woman I had been last Christmas, sitting at a table decorated in elegance, smiling through betrayal and plotting my escape under candlelight. It felt like remembering someone else's life. My phone buzzed beside me, a message from an unknown number. "Merry Christmas, Naomi. I hope you're well." I stared at the screen for a moment, not with pain, not with longing, but with gratitude, because I no longer belonged to that past. Not the lies, not the heartbreak, not the version of myself who believed she had to shrink to keep love standing upright. I deleted the message, not angrily, just peacefully. Inside, someone called my name. Dessert was ready, music was playing, the house was alive. I stepped back into the warm glow of the living room, and laughter rose to meet me. Soft, joyful, free. I lifted my glass, tapped a spoon lightly against it, and the room quieted. I spoke. Not loudly. Just enough for everyone to hear the truth in my voice. To new beginnings, I said. To peace earned the hard way. To choosing ourselves even when love tries to convince us not to. And to the kind of Christmas that finally feels like home. Glasses clinked. A gentle chorus of cheers filled the room, and as I looked around at the warmth, the people, the life I had built with my own hands, I felt something settle deep within me, a quiet, steady certainty. I didn't just survive Ethan. I didn't just expose him. I didn't just walk away. I outgrew him. And that was the sweetest revenge of all.